that requires all data processors and controllers to file annual compliance reports. This conversation will start with the press release that we released a while ago, reminding all those that did not submit their annual compliance reports of 2023 to do so, to file them with PDPO. Anita, are you able to project that public notice?
Yes, just give me a second.
Okay, as Anita does that, so one, I need to clarify that this particular reminder is to those that didn't submit their annual compliance reports within the time indicated. So that time of 2023 is between July to September. So the other question, before I get into how to complete the report, has been who is required to submit? Does it also include a person who was registered in December 2023 or November? And please be notified that this reminder is only for those that are on the data protection register as of 30th June 2023. Anyone registered with PDPO after that period, just prepare to submit the report of 2024, still within July to September. So that said, this particular public notice also provides where the report should be submitted. A number of individuals either sending to particular employees of PDPO's email addresses. We discourage you from doing that. Otherwise, you risk your report possibly being missed. You are reminded that the only email address that you should submit your reports to is the one which is shown on the screen, which is compliance@pdpo.go.ug. And the timeline, it is 20th March. It is not February, but actually March, within the indicated time. So failure to follow this, one is, as we've indicated in there, it will be an offense as stipulated by Regulation 48 of the Data Protection and Privacy Regulations. And remember, the regulations talk about any person that has failed to submit the report, enforcement action will be taken against them. So do not expose your organization to enforcement measures of that kind. Submit your report early enough. And remember, why we are indicating that should be within email, that way this will have timestamps to tell when that report was submitted. And this applies to only those that have not submitted their reports yet. So with that said, Anita, I think you can stop sharing. We can now move to how to complete the report. So how to complete the report? One, we have a guidance note that we've actually prepared. Anita, please confirm if the guidance note can be seen.
Yes, it can.
So for starters, this is your first point of information in regard to how the annual compliance report should be prepared. It gives you a step-by-step process. We encourage you to read it, get some time. This is the updated one. Look out for one which is on our website, which is the revised version of January 2024. Let me also use the opportunity to remind you, those who may have questions, please do not put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A panel. In the chat, we'll lose those questions. So read through this. It will give you a step-by-step process on how to complete the report. But now I'll turn back to the template itself. We'll start with the logo. The logo that should be put on the report that you're submitting is your company organizational logo, not the PDPO logo. Please take note of that. Then here you will indicate the name of the company. Now, why we call this a template is that we put placeholders, XYZ Uganda Limited. In the past, we received some entities submitting reports using exactly the words that are indicated there, XYZ Uganda Limited. Your company isn't that, so please indicate the name of the company. For those that have a trade name, brand name vis-a-vis the incorporated name, you're advised to use the incorporated name or a name that you use when you're registering with PDPO. Then at the bottom here, you indicate the month within which that report has been submitted. Yes, this is a reminder for 2023 annual compliance reports, but you'll be submitting in January, rather February, or within early March before the deadline, 2024. That is what should be included. But those submitting within that period, you can just add below it the 2023 annual compliance report. The month and date as highlighted here is just to let us know that period within which the report was submitted. This background has already been given by Anita, Regulation 50, that talks about the areas, mainly the complaints. This one is really for your appreciation of why this report is being submitted. Within the regulation, it talks about that you need to indicate the complaints that you received within your entity and any data security breaches. However, Regulation B4 emphasizes that we've added other areas based on the powers given to PDPO to enable you come up with reporting mechanisms of what exactly you're doing in ensuring that your entity complies with the law. So 1.2, you give us a general overview. This is just an indication. You don't need to copy and paste. It's you who knows the operations of your company or organization or ministry, if you're government. So you give us an overview encompassing those activities or your mandate if you're government that entail collecting personal data and ways through which you're going to ensure compliance with the law. So if you've developed a compliance program, now this is where you should indicate one that XYZ company has had its compliance program approved by the highest level of management, it's at this level of implementation, or you are thinking of developing one and at what stage you are in relation to the data that you collect. So that is where you're supposed to indicate such information. And then we've already talked about indicating the month and the year within which organization will submit the report. That's already on the cover page. So the registration status with PDPO, we've still in the past been receiving in companies or organizations submitting annual compliance reports, and yet they're not registered with PDPO. You're encouraged, most especially those that had operations within that time, as already talked about, by June 30th, to ensure that you registered. But if you're not registered as of today, the best that you can do is register, but you don't have to submit your report. You just have to wait for between July to September 2024. So this only applies, I reiterate, to those on the data protection register, which is a public register, as of 30th June 2023. So if you're already registered and your registration was due for renewal, you would need to indicate those details here, plus your registration number. If within the reporting period, you had any changes in the registered particulars, you indicate those. So here we just give examples. Let's say you change place of business, a number of you have been changing data protection officers, indicate those details here. But this doesn't mean or take away your obligation to formally notify PDPO. We always encourage those that are changing data protection officers to formally write to PDPO. That way we can be able to tell that it's the organization that's committing and not an individual. So you doing this in this report does not take away that obligation to formally submit those changes. So now the other area, because when you're registered, we've been driving the requirement to register message through awareness campaigns. So this annual compliance report is really to remind you to think of other steps that should be undertaken by the organization in ensuring that your compliance journey is progressed. And this is where leadership comes in and oversight. So if you have a DPO, you need to indicate who they report to. Then if they're working with the team, now you also indicate the members of the team. Please do not include the names of the individuals. We're only interested in their titles. This applies to the team as well as the person who the DPO is reporting to. Then 3.2 talks about the job description of the data protection officer. So if you have a data protection team or privacy team, we are interested in who is the head of the team. Here, you don't need to give us job descriptions of everyone who is part of that team that we've talked of, if you have a team. So you include one, you let us know, yes, the data protection officer has a job description, and you also indicate whether that job description mirrors the responsibilities provided for in Regulation 47.3. Why this is key is that a number of DPOs, they've been coming to us wondering, okay, we've registered, now we have a DPO, what does a DPO do? This is where this is supposed to notify you, where if a person has it as part of their job description, they will definitely be assessed. So indicate that if you haven't done it, at least what steps have you taken? Have you discussed this with the person you're reporting to, or are there plans to include it? But tell us what was there as at that time within which the report is indicating, or by June 30th, that the particular organization did. That one is very key. And I need to remind you that we'll be keenly following up on this, because we'd like DPOs to be empowered, to be reminded of their responsibilities, and also when you go to 3.3, to be assessed on them. Of course, you're engaged as DPOs, or even having other responsibilities, definitely you have appraisals within your organization. So you need to tell us whether that job description, the responsibilities provided therein in relation to a DPO, you are assessed against them, and that is provided. You do not need to share with us evidence in that regard, demonstrating that this
Thank you.
Indicating one, you don't need to attach the evidence of the job description and then the performance appraisal. But what we encourage you is that you need to keep that evidence. We'll be doing spot checks beyond the annual audits that we do. And one of the things that we'll be looking out for are these job descriptions and your performance assessment. It goes without saying that they should have been signed off. But what you're interested in here is a narrative of whether it has been done or not. So after looking at leadership and oversight, the other one is around notices, policies, and procedures. This one is very important because when you collect, or your organization collects personal data, it's important for you to have transparency provisions. A notice is an outward-facing document letting individuals know how you use their data, which data you collect. So you need to give us information on that. And a policy is an internal document based on other areas. So the first, and you can adopt this table. Yours could be called either a data protection and privacy notice, whichever name that you opted. Indicated that this is the public-facing one. Could be on our website, reception, or whichever channels that you use to collect the personal data. So here you put the date of approval, because these documents should have been approved by the highest level of management within the organization. So which will indicate in that very document that it was signed off and approved by these individuals. But here, you state the date. Then if it's due for review, because these documents should be reviewed based on your processing operations or the indicated timeline, that should be included as well. And then the second one is a policy. Now, a policy is an internal document, letting individuals, the employees, your contractors, any third-party agents, so that you may be dealing with, that the information that has been collected by the organization, this is how we use it, retain it, give people access to it, and then having compliance measures in case anyone doesn't follow the policy, what action can be taken against them. So still date of approval. And then if it's still a very new document and you haven't yet determined, you can put not applicable. And then we go to information security. Now, this covers other information assets beyond personal data. So if you have one, then you indicate when it was approved, and then when it's due for renewal. Then the last one is records management. Still, this can go beyond personal data. So it looks at the information life cycle, how the organization collects data, which department, and where it's kept, which controls are in place in that regard. Still, you indicate those dates. Now, this part of training is conducted. We need to know, because when you develop these documents, they are for the staff, and then these other third-party contractors we talked of, they need to be trained on the provisions of these documents. Now, for third parties, let's say, which ideally are other companies, those could be awareness sessions. But for internal staff, they are training. So you indicate the number of such sessions that have been conducted for each policy or notice. Now, the other area is the training and awareness. This training and awareness is to make sure that still some of those categories that we've talked of, staff, third parties, contractors, and agents receive appropriate training and awareness sessions in regard to the privacy commitments in those documents. So 5.1 deals with now the DPO themselves. This one is specifically provided for in the regulations that the organization should make sure that they provide training to the DPO so that they can be well equipped in performing their responsibilities. So here you give us details of the title of the training, you as the DPO that you've been able to undertake, who conducted it, and the date of the training. You don't have to give us the documentation or evidence of such trainings or links, but we encourage you that you keep evidence. Like I indicated earlier, when we are doing spot checks, audits, or even investigations, we always ask for this particular information in regard to its evidence. And I also need to highlight generally this annual compliance report, why we insist as well. In case we are doing or interacting with you in any way, we'll ask, where is your 2022 annual compliance report in case you are registered at that time, 2023. So be mindful of the information that you put in here. If you give us false information, there are also penalties provided for in the law. I know a number of you attend trainings or webinars which are conducted by PDPO, so you can include those. But we are also encouraging you to make sure that beyond what PDPO provides for, make sure that you either budget or you look out for the free ones using the free platforms that relate to your specific processing operations. Those should be included. Otherwise, we wouldn't want to have a table that is full of only PDPO trainings. Please ensure that you look out for others as well as the DPO. And then the other is other trainings conducted by the DPO. Now, remember, as the DPO, one of your main responsibilities is to conduct trainings on the policies and notices. 2, now we start with 5.2, the internal staff. So you let us know which department, if your organization has different departments, human resources, the total number of staff to be trained or who are part of that department, how many of those were trained. Please include all those departments. Where none was conducted as well, you can put the department and include 0. But of course, as you know, you should make plans in the subsequent years to ensure that everyone is covered. Then the other ones are agents. Agents could be such as mobile money agents for telecom companies, banks, these agencies, banks for agency banking, or even could be someone who provides you with hosting services, cab hailing services, or a restaurant, canteen, and all those that you may share personal data with. Now, here, many for awareness sessions, letting them know, because remember, you give them that data to deal with it in ways that you've committed in your policies. So let them know, yes, we've given you this data to do ABCD, but these are our commitments. Make sure that you are mindful of them. In case there is a breach, you let us know. All other areas as required within those policies. And then you indicate, now for here, not department, definitely, should be the number of agents that you engage with that may access the personal data that you've collected. And then how many of those that have actually completed that training. Again, please keep that evidence. You don't have to share it with us now, but keep it somewhere safe. When we interact with you, we'll always start with that particular information. Now, 5.4, this is an annual activity whereby every January within Uganda, we celebrate the Data Privacy Month. That day is extended to cover an entire month. We've always been encouraging you, giving you materials that make sure you create awareness of the day, your commitments of the policies, on the law, to your still those categories, staff whose data you collect, third parties who you give the data to, and then guests who may access your premises and related activities and categories. So tell us which activities you undertook. So you can let us know, number one, this is what you did. Maybe you organize for staff within on such a day and things of that kind. Include that narrative in the report. So going forward as well, this you should be mindful of it. If you know, PDPO, not even if, when PDPO releases this information, make sure that you actually plan for these activities. Where you haven't done any, indicate it. But going forward, you know, reports that have nothing to do with the commemoration of the International Data Privacy Day will not be accepted. So this is an activity that you need to plan for within the resources that you have. It doesn't have to, you know, have a specific budget. Some of these platforms are free, such as Zoom, or even a staff meeting, getting a room within the organization. You can use those facilities. Those that have the resources, you know, you can use other channels, possibly media, print, broadcast, or even interviews in, within the broadcast media. So please include those activities. So where you have any relevant photographic evidence supporting these activities, you can attach it. Remember, attach evidence where you sought the consent of those individuals to take their photos at such events. Wouldn't want you to be violating that right within the annual compliance report. And then the other is around the complaints related to data protection and privacy. So as you're aware, the law empowers data subjects who believe that a data processor, collector, or controller is infringing on their rights to make a complaint. It references the guidance note. We have one on lodging complaints with PDPO that says, before a complaint is brought to PDPO, we encourage the data subjects, the individuals, to reach out to the concerned organization to try to resolve it within 30 days. So you, as the organization that is filing the annual compliance reports, you give us a summary of those complaints that you've received and the year when the complaint was received, and then how the resolution status. So many were resolved and so many are pending. Now, some complaints can stretch over a number of years. So if it's still an open complaint, from, let's say, 2022 should be included here as part of those that are pending resolution. But you also need to give us a narrative of the most frequent complaint received in relation to either your clients requesting for options on how to unsubscribe from your organization's marketing messages, and then you include the number, and then you say, however, maybe here we give an example, 96% of them were resolved. Remember, these are only complaints in regard to misuse or mishandling of personal data. The different scenarios or situations within which such complaints may arise are within that guidance note. We encourage you to visit our website, go to the information center, and download it. It will help you properly categorize. Again, please keep that evidence. You don't have to share it here, but we'll be interested in it when we interact with you. The other one is to do with the data security breaches. Now, these data security breaches, of course, you are aware section, I believe it's 23 of the law says, you know, if you believe the information that you have, personal data, has either been accessed by an authorized person, changed, and possibly lost, generally talking about its security, then the law requires you to notify PDPO. So you indicate the number, then the year of the breach and its status. So the way we are looking at breaches, I need to highlight, you know, so many of you may be experiencing breaches and you're not even notifying us. We are not looking to penalize you per se. Look at it as the aviation industry. Why it's one of the safest to users modes of transport is because these pilots, they can be able to actually notify the different other plane users, rather operators, that, you know, there is a problem and all that. As the industry, they come up with proper solutions on how that could be addressed, because one person may know the challenge where another one doesn't, and they interface with it, and the other one came up with a solution. So notifying of breaches, we look at it from that angle, and generally internationally, that's how it's looked at. If you notify a data security breach to the regulator, they're able to give you regulatory guidance, first of all. Secondly, how you can advise the data subjects, the individuals. But also thirdly, how that information can be useful to other players that may be experiencing such a problem, but they don't know how to resolve it. Still, give us the most frequent cause of that security breach, what it resulted into, maybe so many records were lost, maybe money was lost in that regard, in generality. So you should also highlight within the narrative any measures that you've undertaken to address those gaps that contributed to the data security breach, just outlining the remedial actions taken by your management to prevent future data security breaches. So the other is the data protection impact assessment. We add the word if applicable, because data protection impact assessment has specific scenarios under which it could be conducted as provided for in the regulation. So if it's one of those, let's say, and we give the examples, you're deploying those CCTV cameras, first you determine within generally a DPIA what data it will collect, where it should be placed. No one should be placing a CCTV camera directly above a person's workstation, because there you'll definitely be violating their privacy rights. So an impact assessment in that regard will let you know, okay, where should it be placed? How long should it be on? How long should that information be kept? And where is it needed anyway? So if you were deploying CCTV cameras, you tell us the date when the data protection impact assessment was concluded. Remember, it should be signed off by the DPO. Let's say another, it's processing location data of users using a mobile app that enables collection of their geolocation data for a longer period of time. You did a DPIA, you concluded it at this point, but remember, the most important bit of it is that it will help you know the risk to the privacy of the individuals, and you come up with mitigation measures. So we've been following up those that have been providing this information, whether if it was a new project, that DPIA led to changes of the project scope to improve the privacy rights, or if it was developing a mobile application, features which are privacy by design were embedded. But where you didn't have any activity that requires a DPIA, then you can indicate not applicable. So the other is data protection and privacy audits. Now, the law requires, as the data protection officer, that you conduct assessments or audits to be able to assess your organization's data collection and processing operations, whether number one, they comply with your policies, but also with the law. Now, going back to where we talked about the compliance mechanisms, you could have come up with a compliance program that has the scope of data protection laws being different. One having one of Uganda, then another, let's say, of Kenya, because some of your customers are in Kenya, and that law applies to you, or you have Europeans, residents having the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, or even international standards for that matter. So your audit or assessment could have been conducted based on those particular frameworks. So if it was done internally, you indicate how many were completed within the reporting period, and then the percentage of implementation of the recommendations where gaps were identified. If it was external, such as one of PDPO or any other party that you would have engaged, you indicate the number and how many have been, rather the percentage of implementation of the recommendations. That way is the only way you can be able to tell whether your compliance program is achieving what was intended to be achieved. And then also they will tell you the posture of your organization in regard to compliance. So we always encourage. Now for this, it is a must, but the period is really determined by your processing operations. There are some institutions that can conduct more than one. There are others that can conduct only one, but we advise at least in a year, either an audit. Now an audit is fully fledged. Of course, it goes into looking at the process operations and all that, but an assessment may not go into that much detail. But as the DPO, do the DPO or through another person, at least you need to conduct an audit or an assessment. So please always plan for it. Then in conclusion, the general takeaways are giving us feedback or general observations, because you're the one who's implementing these various processes. You can tell us, number one, what challenges you've had in implementing that compliance program, possibly something that you want us to be aware of as the regulator. It could just be a comment, it could just be a remark on the report, what you think possibly could improve in the report, emphasize, and what support you may need from the regulator. So this is really like a suggestion box and general observation. So this is another area in the conclusion part that we are keenly following up on. Because it's one of the ways through which, beyond the usual interactions you have with us, that we can have something documented to be able to assist you in your compliance journey. Because remember, compliance is not an event or a destination. So the declaration, be mindful, please give us correct information. Otherwise, if you give us false information, you know that carries penalties within the law. So who should sign the annual compliance report? Should either be, for government, an accounting officer, an organization, could be a managing director, company secretary, or the DPO. This should really be someone that can commit the organization that should sign that report. So they indicate the name of that person submitting the report, their title. This could be the DPO. If you have another title, / you indicate that as well. And then you sign off. You date the report, the date within which you're completed and you're submitting it. If you have a company seal, that you can include it, or stamp. Where you don't have, you shouldn't bother about that. It's more of a best practice. So basically, that's it. That's the report. You still have a number of days, the deadline. We've already talked about it. I believe now we can go to the Q&A. Thank you. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you so much, Becca, for that wonderful presentation. I hope each one of us has been able to understand how best to work on our annual privacy compliance reports. Now we have a couple of questions in the Q&A panel. And ladies and gentlemen, if you had probably posted your question in the chat, I would like to encourage you to kindly put it in the Q&A panel, so that we do not miss out on it. And Becca, I would like to request that maybe instead of taking one question at a go, we take like 5 at a go, because most of the questions look to be related. I don't know if that is okay with you.
Okay, Anita.
Okay. All right, so I'll move straight to the questions. One, someone is asking, can we submit after our NGO's financial year, which is the calendar year, or it must be according to your financial year? And 2, does the company that was registered in 2024 have to submit the report? The next question, should we always leave the watermark upon submission? He's probably talking about the watermark that is within the template. And then I kindly request for clarity on which report. Okay, this has been talked about, but Becca, you will clarify. Am I on 5 already? And of course, is it for 2023 or 24? Those are basically the same questions. You can maybe take those and then we move to the next question.
Okay, thank you, Anita. I'll start with the first. Can we submit after NGO's financial year, which is calendar year, or it must be according to your financial year? Now, the period is indicated in the law, and that is what should be followed. And the law says you should submit at the end of the government financial year, which is, it ends in June. So the period, before you get entangled in the financial years, just know that every calendar year, between July to September, you should have submitted your annual compliance report. Please follow the law, not what is provided in elsewhere. Then the second one, does the company that was registered in 2024 have to submit a report? Yes, only if they didn't submit within the required period. Oh, sorry, registered? No, I've gotten that wrong. If you're registered in 2024, you don't need to submit. Only wait for that period of July to September. Then another, I think it's supposed to be should I always leave the watermark? Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Please remove the watermark. I believe the watermark that we currently have reads draft, And definitely what you would have submitted would be the final. So if you'd like to maintain a watermark, at least should be able to read final, but not draft. Then, Anita, I think I've answered all those.
I think you have answered the 5. Okay, I'll move on to the next questions. As an organization, we registered in September. When are we eligible to submit? I think this is basically what you've just answered. Now, there are questions coming in related to registration. I am going to first handle, I think, the annual compliance report, then we'll come for this later. Okay, please confirm which organizations are required to file. Is it only those who have registered before 30th June 2023? I think, Becca, you have answered this. Good morning. If your company was only registered in October 2023, I only have to file a report between July and September. Is that correct? Yes. And then okay, there's a question about DPOs, Becca. I am going to request that maybe we take some of the questions regarding other things as well, because it might be hard to come back for them later. So this one asks, is every NGO supposed to have a DPO? Who pays them? If we can add that role to one staff, how will they be trained? Becca, maybe you can first take that and then
Okay, thank you, Anita. Now, the law gives a specific data processing operations where a DPO is a must. And however, what we've been encouraging as part of registration, that all organizations should at least have a DPO. Why is that? We followed that route because at least if you have a person that will look into your compliance measures, it will be a lot easier than for you to continuously reaching out to DPO guiding. If you have someone internal, that could help. So the short answer is yes, every NGO should have a DPO. I think the other question was, I think on payment, I believe it's around designation.
Payment and training as well.
Now, the law requires that you should train them, so please budget for that. Then on payment, now, of course, if you engage a person, I believe in the Employment Act. Now, this is speaking to other laws, and they are doing work for you. There are ways you should pay them. Now, the law uses the word, now this is the Data Protection and Privacy Act designation, that you could already be employing a person undertaking other activities. Then you just add on the role of the DPO. So it's up to you to determine if they should be given additional pay based on their workload or their existing salary can do that. So the question of whether to pay or not is governed by the Employment Act, and you should look at it. As PDPO, we can't come in and tell you, oh, please don't pay DPO or do this. That please engage your lawyers. Thank you, over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I believe and hope that has been very clear.
Oh, sorry, Anita, I forgot the second part. Talked about designation. I'd forgotten the second part of the question on whether to pay. Now, we use the word designation is where you add on additional duties. But if you have the resources, is where you appoint, where a person does exclusively that role. But I've already talked about how to handle the payment. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I'll get some other questions. There are very many questions coming in. We'll try as much as we can to answer most of you. So someone asks, can the data protection policies be on a group-wide basis, or does a company have to have its own policy? 2, does it mean we have to train all our staff on the Data Protection and Privacy Act? Then the third question is, are the number of trainings conducted in total since the policies were implemented? Okay, I think the question is, are we supposed to consider all the number of trainings that were conducted in total since policies were implemented, or only in the year of reporting? And then another question, we started working in 2023. Are we eligible to report? Becca, I think you can take those.
Okay, thank you, Anita. The first question was around a company having group-wide data protection policies. Yes, now look at policies this way. So if you are living, let me say, in which country? Morocco. So definitely if you're in Morocco, the laws of Morocco apply to you. A person cannot come, a Moroccan, work in Uganda and say, but why should I follow Ugandan laws? Yet, I'm from Morocco. Yes, you have group policies, but they apply to the group operations. However, when it comes to Uganda, you need to see whether those group policies adhere to the provisions in the Ugandan law. Now, and we interface with this as part of the audits. You find an organization, they say, if a breach has happened, then you can report within 72 hours, and yet the Ugandan law says immediately. So please tailor those policies to the Ugandan law. Review them. If they are very similar to the Ugandan law, then you need not tailor them. But where there is a divergence, that should be rectified. Then the other.
Oh, Becca, I think you just
went. Sorry, I went mute about that. Then the other is on training of staff. Now, the trainings, I believe you are asking if these trainings, the number of trainings that have been conducted, we are interested in those within the reporting period. Please be mindful of that. That's why you include the year within which you're submitting the report. Only consider those that were conducted. Then the other one is around 2023. Again, we've already talked about this. If this only applies, this reminder, to those that were on the register as of 30th June 2023. But then going forward, you're encouraged. The law says it's an annual report. Submit within July to September of every year. I hope I've responded to all, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Becca. Okay, I'll take more questions. One, is there any PDPO training planned? Two, who are the service providers recommended for data protection and privacy training for data protection officers? And then three, if submission of the report was done using the old version, is there a need to redo the report? And then I think this is the fourth. How can the data protection and privacy trainings be tailor-made at organization or company level?
Okay, thank you. I'll start.
Okay.
I'll start with the last. How can training be tailor-made? One, we always advise that, that training can only be tailored if you start with training people on your own developed policies, because your policies will indicate what your compliance measures are. And then another on how you can tailor them. If you have departments that regularly interface with collection of data, I'll give an example, such as, those at reception collect a lot of information, HR, then those in business operations, if in a bank, those that do loan processing. So those should have training that is tailored around their roles and how they handle data. So that is how you can do it. So you can't tell a person that, okay, do this, but then their daily routine doesn't involve that element of collection and use of data. It will not augur well with them. So please consider your very own roles. And that's why, one of the responsibilities of the DPO, you do a data mapping. When you do a data mapping and you tell, these are the departments, units that collect data for this reason, you can come up with training that is tailored to those particular departments. Then the other was, who are the service providers that should be trained? Now, service providers, remember, this is around data protection and privacy. only those that you give access to data to, like the examples I gave. Now, electronically, it could be, let's say, I'll use the examples of some of the organizations that we've interacted with. So one, they have an insurance policy or cover for their staff. So they will be giving this information to an insurance provider, individuals' names and their health status and all that. Definitely those, you should make them aware of your privacy policies and notices. Then another could be, let's say if they provide lunch whereby, individuals have to go in, either they pay or it's given free of charge. So they are given names of staff that should have that. That should be made aware of. If you have cab hailing services provided in your organization, a person can use their phone. So in short, it's anyone who you give personal data that you collect. Then submission of the older version. So if you submitted your report before the public notice, you don't need to submit it again. However, if you haven't submitted the report and yet you're on the register on June 30th, please use the latest version of the annual compliance report. I guess that is it. I think
Yes.
The question was around how can training be tailored, which I've responded to. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I'll take more questions. So someone asks, do we need to include items that are not applicable in cases, for example, where an item is not applicable to their organization? The question is, should they mention not applicable or should they just ignore that part and not include it in their report? And then two, someone asks about the DPO trainings in case you conduct audit and want evidence attached of the trainings. How do we present that PDPO trained DPOs, because the office doesn't provide certificates of attendance? And then how do we share what we have done? This question is not clear. Collins Kisembo, if you can maybe type that again. We have been registered since 2022, but we got our license from Bank of Uganda in December last year. So they've been registered since 2022. However, their operations started only this year. So they would like to find out if they are liable to filing the 2022 and 2023 annual compliance reports. Okay, let's see if I can get. Okay, for those asking for a list of registered organizations, a link was posted in the chat. Kindly check it out. And then someone says, can a description of the roles of the data protection officers be shared? Becca, I think I will let you take those so that I don't confuse you with many questions.
Okay, thank you, Anita. I'll start with the last one. Can the roles be shared? You just have to download the regulations from our information center because they are provided for in there. So you can put the link in the chat section as well. Please consider Regulation 47.3, which is also indicated in the template report. So the second question was about an organization that was registered in 2022 by PDPO, I believe, then was given an operational license by Bank of Uganda this year. Is it required to submit 2023 or 2022 report? The response is yes. As you may be aware that a number of activities or sections in the report can speak to some of the things that you could have done even before operation. Developing policies, what you haven't been able to do, please indicate it, which ties into the second question rather than another question on items which are not applicable to you. Just like this company that may not have been operational, so may not have undertaken or conducted some of those activities, please include those sections in the report. Don't delete them, but rather your response should be not applicable, and then you give a bit of narrative. but otherwise don't submit a report which has missing sections. Those that are not applicable to you, mention it clearly. Then do you need attaching of evidence? Well, please remember we said, you don't need to attach evidence of the trainings, just keep it on record. The only evidence that we may need is of the commemoration of the International Data Privacy Day. Now, specific to the question, even where you have to keep the evidence, trainings conducted or awareness sessions conducted by PDPO. Now, when most of our sessions are conducted online, so you register and an email is sent to you. Keep that as evidence. Now, in case it's an in-person training where we come to your premises, at least take pictures and keep them on record if you obtained the individual's consent. So that's the evidence that we require you to have. Since for now, we do not have certificates, but we are developing a training curriculum where certificates will be issued, but that will be possibly in about a year or so. That is it, Anita, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I'll continue with more questions. For those asking for the copies of the presentation, what Becca shared was actually a copy of the report template that was shared earlier in the chat, both a link and the word template. But you can always reach out to us in case you need it, and we shall continue sharing it in the chat. Please be sure to download it. So someone is asking, who signed the report before submission to PDPO? Should it be senior management or board? And then 2, do we need to conduct a data protection impact assessment in case we are onboarding a third party to handle the KYC process? And then 3, considering that training of this updated template is occurring after International Privacy Day, will companies be penalized for not taking any specific actions to commemorate the International Data Privacy Day? Okay, I'm trying to figure out what questions haven't been answered yet. For those asking about the template, we'll post it in the chat. Then does the training for DPOs have to be external, or it can as well be internal? Is it possible that you can share with us a checklist of what is required from the data protection officer? I think the report should be able to cover this, but Becca will elaborate more on this as well. Over to you.
Okay, maybe there is an additional one, Anita. Someone has requested the template can be shared in the chat of the annual compliance report. Now, the question, sorry?
Yeah, we'll share the template. We'll share the template.
Okay, thank you. Now, checklist of what is required. Actually, what I started with, the guidance note on completion of an annual compliance report. It is written in a format of a checklist, though with a bit of more narrative. So please use that as the checklist. And then does the training of a DPO have to be internal or external? Well, that is up to you. Now, I'm wondering, internal training of a DPO, how it will go. Who will be training the DPO? But you think about it as long as they can be upskilled. But we are not specific on whether it's an external or internal person or party. And then training, rather evidence of commemoration of the International Data Privacy Day. This webinar happening after the celebration of such a day. If you didn't do anything, well, provide a narrative in that regard. But going forward, we are going to be very emphatic on this. Please budget, and that's why you see we are having this conversation at least a year away from the next one. Plan for it and make sure that these activities are undertaken. And then a DPIA for whether you are required to conduct a data protection impact assessment for a processor who will be undertaking know your customer processes. Definitely, yes. Reason being, when you look at some of the situations where a DPIA could be conducted is where if a person, will be processing as part of your core activities, special personal data. Now, KYC, I'll give general responses since you haven't given your specific operations. Let's say it's a financial institution or a player in the financial sector. Financial data, related information is special personal data. Any person who undertakes it in that regard, you need to conduct a DPIA. Remember, DPIA is to help you know the risks, how you will mitigate them, and the suggestion or proposals on how to better manage the data. So with the information that you've given, I would advise that you conduct one. Then the last question was on who should sign the annual compliance report. Should it be the board or management? Good question. This should be management. It shouldn't be the board. Thank you. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I'll take more questions. Someone asks, the directive indicated that the 2023 report is to be submitted by 20th. Which report will then be submitted between July and September 2024? Well, that will be the 2024 report. Is the audit mandatory for NGOs? And then another question, is a data collector and processor the same? And then another question is, for those that have submitted this report, are we going to be able to receive an acknowledgement from the PDPO? Okay, Becca, maybe you can take those for now.
Thank you. I'll start with the last. Those that have submitted the report, will they receive an acknowledgement from PDPO? We've been doing this. So yes, we are not planning to stop. We shall still be sending you the acknowledgement of receipt of the report. The question of who is the controller or processor. Now, this varies on one, there are distinct definitions. The controller is the person who determines which information to collect from a data subject, the means and the purposes. So let's say you're an employee, rather an employer, you want to employ individuals. So you'll say, this is a description of a job advert. These are the people that I want, education background. So you determine which information to collect and the means, submit on an email, bring hard copies, and then the purposes, of course, is to assess who the best candidate is for that particular role. So that makes you a controller. Now, a processor could be a separate person, whereby you who has collected that data, now you give it to another person. If you have a firm that handles recruitment, rather setting up of interviews on your behalf. So you give them that information. So a processor is any person that a controller hands over information to, with instructions on how they should deal with it. However, there are scenarios where the same organization, due to their data collection and processing operations, in one operation, there could be a controller. I'll give a bank. So a bank will have CCTV cameras. It will determine where they are placed, and either it collects images or voice or even both. So there will be a controller in that regard. But then the same bank, using another data processing operations, could be a processor, where, let's say, as PDPO, I bank with bank, let me say X. So now my salary is sent to that bank. Now that bank is given information about me, how much I should be paid, and my other details. In that transaction, they're a processor. So that is the difference between the two. But we encourage you to go to our information center. We have FAQs that give more detail in that regard. But this definition comes from the law as well. Is an audit mandatory for NGOs? Yes, it is. But we also indicated where an audit, when you haven't been able to conduct it in that year, you could do an assessment, which is a bit lighter. Then this directive, Anita, the first question was confusing. The person saying, is it 2023, 2024? I don't know whether you responded to it or it was incomplete.
They were asking whether the report is for 2023 or 2024. If they submit now, which report are they then going to submit in September? And I think I had answered that, the one of 2024. So basically 2023, 2024 financial year.
Maybe to, thank you for that. If you didn't submit, number one, you need to first determine, were you registered as of 30th June 2023, which is last year? If you were, the second question is, last year, did you submit your annual compliance report within July to September? If you didn't, then you're submitting this year for the one that you didn't submit. Another set of questions, Anita.
Okay. Thank you, Becca. We are a church entity. Please enlighten such. Gerald, you need to rephrase your question and maybe ask it better. And then another question is, we were registered on 30th March. And my question is for cases where an organization doesn't have or has not had any breach or complaint since registration. Is it okay to leave that section unanswered? And then another question here is, how or when does a DPO request for the Data Protection Office to conduct the data protection audit? I'm going to ask you, Becca, to first take those because the questions that follow, most of them have been answered.
Thank you. Now, start with the last. When does a DPO, a Data Protection Officer, request for training from the Personal Data Protection Office? Anytime because it's you who would like the training, you propose the date, the time, the format, then you send an email to info@pdpo.go.ug. Then we can revert either if we're available on that date or if another format to conduct the training, but that is how you do it. When is determined by you. So if you haven't, the other question was if an organization hasn't experienced or suffered any data security breach, that applies to other areas. If nothing had happened, now like here, you just indicate not applicable, the organization didn't suffer the data security breach. That is how we go about it. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Becca. And then another question we have is, are there any organizations exempted from filing the annual compliance report? And then 2, if a company was registered, let's say in May 2023, that's basically a month towards the end of the financial year, is it required to do full year submission for the entire July 2022 to June 2023? Okay, Becca, I think you can take those. Another thing I can see, we've run out of time. You'll guide on how much time you have left.
I think, Anita, for the time, this being a unique webinar, I think we can go, I don't know how many questions we are left with. Let's go up to 20 past so that we can exhaust all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the question of exempted from, whether you can be exempted from filing an annual compliance report. No one is exempted. Then the second question is, if you're registered in May 2023, are you required to give full year submissions? Now, what you need to be mindful is that if we are telling you, whether when the law is telling you submit within July 2023, July to September 2023, you're giving us a report between that time from, let's say, May up to the previous year. So it has aspects of 2022, but within the reporting period. So it's not that it's only for 2023, it just looks at that period covered. Yes, Anita?
Okay, thanks, Becca. Okay, another question. Do you have an audit template from PDPO that can be provided to help ensure that we are all on the right track according to your expectations? Also, are there specific external auditors other than the PDPO who you can probably recommend? And then another question, our organization is small with 2 staff, others are not full-time but volunteers. Can we have our administrator do the same role as PDPO? Becca, I'll combine this question with another one. Someone was also asking whether their ED of the NGO can as well be the DPO. So I think when you're answering that, it will be combined. And then another question, this is going to be the third. Could we also organize a webinar to give awareness to MDs or GMs since implementation comes with management support? Okay, and then another one I'm going to give you, maybe you first hand of those, is do you have a user-friendly manual to guide us while training our staff? Over to you, Becca.
Okay, I'll start with the last user-friendly manual for training. At the moment, we don't, but we are developing a training curriculum that will be available in a year, about a year from now. And I believe it will be able, to cover some of that. So then the second question was awareness to MDs. Anita, was this question, was it talking about if PDPO can or if the DPO?
If PDPO can organize webinars for their management teams as well.
Okay, for this, we, like I indicated earlier, send a request to info@pdpo.go.ug, indicating those details, then we'll give you feedback, whether when it can be rather conducted. Then the other question was, who could be designated as the DPO? Can your ED be designated as one? And the response is no. Because your ED or your managing director, it would be hard for them to undertake all these activities. Your ED to train, to ensure an audit is done, no. But an administrator, for now, yes. And also within about 9 months from now, we'll have a proper guidelines and guidance note on who should be designated as a DPO, what qualifications should you look at, background and all those matters. That will be shared. But for now, for the administrator, we say you can go ahead. But later on, we'll give proper guidance. Then, do we have recommendations of external auditors who can conduct data protection and privacy audits? At the moment, we do not have any, and we can't recommend because we do not have a proper review process to be able to assess and guide you that, please, you can look into this. But later on, in about, I believe, 1.5 years, we are coming up with an accreditation framework where individuals based on their skill set and experience will be accredited by PDPO to do such activities. But for now, we don't. Do you have a template for an audit? For now, we have, it's really needs foundational stages. Some of you could have access to it. It's an Excel sheet, that you can use. That could also be shared by Anita. We have two of them. One covers privacy, legal aspects, and the second one covers information security. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you so much, Becca. I'll move on to the next questions. Okay, someone says third parties can be informed of our data policies, but how can we be responsible for their actions if they don't follow the same policies? And then 2, are there any certifications we should look for when outsourcing our data protection role to third-party companies? And then 3, do we collectively submit a single report as an organization, or we individually submit reports directly to PDPO? And then I think this is the 4th probably. Would it be necessary to train service providers if these providers show clear evidence of internal data privacy trainings in their organizations? And then the 5th, which I'm going to take, is we registered in 2022. Are we supposed to file from 2022 to date? Over to you, Becca.
Oh, sorry. The last one was if they registered when, please repeat
They
it.
registered in 2022 and they have not been able to submit since then. So he's wondering if they should do a report that covers 2022 to date.
Yes, please do that. Then the other one is whether
Whether
service providers
should be
sorry
trained. Yeah,
yes
whether
whether they
service should be trained.
Yes, now for service providers, it's not necessarily training, it is creating awareness. And reason being, because if you give them your personal data, you need to tell them the commitments that you've made in your policies to the people from whom you collected. So you need to make them aware. Now, the evidence that they may have, it could be in regard to what they collect as controllers and controllers. But this awareness, it is needed. Otherwise, the law says it could be a valid defense if you did everything that the law required of you, but something went wrong. So this should be conducted. Now, single report for the same organization. I wonder how big this organization is, or if a person says one organization has more than one DPO. But you've left it a bit too open. And let's say if you have a number of branches, of course, if you're operating within Uganda, have one report. But if it's let's say a bank that has a branch in South Africa, definitely that report will only deal with South African operations. You want those, rather one that deals with data of Ugandan citizens and residents, which should be one. And then certifications to look out for. Well, we are coming up with an accreditation program. So right now, we haven't assessed any for you to tell you. It's on one-on-one basis where, we can advise as individuals, but not as the office. Then if a third party does not follow what you require of them, possibly you train them, this is where we also ask you to document, have the evidence. You sent emails, you communicated to them. So, and also in your policies where you should have compliance measures. You can either terminate a relationship with them, take any action, otherwise they will expose you to the penalties provided for in the law, which can even be up to 2% of your gross annual turnover, or imprisonment of every person in the organization that allowed the non-compliance to go on, which imprisonment is between 3 months to 10 years. Over to you, Nathan. We are remaining about 4 minutes, so hopefully we'd have concluded most of them in the 4 minutes.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you, Becca, because at the moment I see most of the questions are repeated. Maybe one unique question I'm seeing here is, what is the process of removing a previously appointed data protection officer? Are there any set guidelines? I think, Becca, you can take that. I am trying to see if there are any other unique questions.
For the question of, well, it's best practice for now, how to do it, but it's covered within the law, which says if you're to make any changes within your registered particulars, communicate to the PDPO. So the change is one of those, or rather change of the DPO. You formally write a letter to us letting us know this is the new DPO, and then you give us those details as indicated in the registration form, their name, phone number, email address, physical address, and the other information. So that's the guidance that we're giving you for now.
Okay, thank you, Becca. Now there's another question here. Someone says, we work in an environment of head office and field offices. Does this mean that each field office has to have their own data protection officer and probably file their own reports?
Oh, thank you for the clarity. Let me first take that. Now, remember, the submission of the report is based on the registered organization. I wouldn't want to respond to some of these questions publicly because they may cause confusion. We have a number of, if I get what the person is asking, where you have an organization, a development partner that has so many projects, whereby each project has its own project manager. Now, please reach out to us so that we don't cause confusion in such a public forum. But what I advise is that the report is submitted by every registered organization. So if you know you're registered by PDPO, then you're required to submit an annual compliance report. Thank you. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you, Becca. There is a question. Kindly advise in case there were no changes made in regards to the registered particular. How do you handle 2.2? I don't remember what was on 2.2, but maybe Becca, if you're able to check from your end.
So this may be any question around changes, let me respond to it. If you made any changes within the registered particulars, in other words, the information you gave us during registration, that is why you indicate those changes. However, if no changes were made in any area, DPO, data collected, none of it was ever made, then you just need to state this is not applicable because no changes were made in any of the registered particulars submitted as part of registration, no renewal of the registration of the organization with PDPO.
Okay, thank you, Becca. I think we've come to the end of the questions that are specifically about the annual compliance reports. I've seen a couple of questions about registration. Please note that they were not just ignored, but these are questions we are always going to respond to. But I noticed most of the questions are centered on, I paid for more than 1 year, but I got a certificate of only 1 year. Please note that our certificates are for only a period of 1 year, after which you are expected to renew. Now, in instances where you've paid for example, 5 years, we encourage you to use the same payment proof whenever you are renewing for the 5 years. And then for those that are still asking for the templates, we are still sharing the Word version. The other one is available on the website. We've noticed a couple of you are saying we share this information on your emails, but please note we've been sharing this information. The only challenge we have is at the moment, some of you are unsubscribing from our mailing list. And when you unsubscribe, you lose on getting such information. So we kindly encourage you to stop unsubscribing. And 2, if you haven't unsubscribed and you're not getting these emails, please update your contact details with us. And then, of course, if you have any other questions, I think, Becca, we are going to stop here with the questions. If you have any other questions, please write to compliance@pdpo.go.ug. Those are questions related to annual compliance reports, so anything compliance. And then for questions to do with registration, write to registration@pdpo.go.ug. And then trainings and other general questions, write to info@pdpo.go.ug. I'm going to type all those emails in the chat so that you have them. Becca, I think you are going to give us your parting shots. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Anita. So I won't reiterate what you've already talked about, but I'd like to thank all those that have made time to attend the webinar and even ask questions. The parting shot really is that we are intent on enforcing this particular provision. Being compliant with the law is not just about registration, but it's around establishing a compliance program whose information you give us in the compliance report. So make sure you submit this report. Otherwise, Regulation 48 is going to be put in effect. With that, I wish you all a great day, and thank you once again for making time.
Okay, thank you so much, Becca. We appreciate you for making that time as well to educate the DPOs on how to file the annual privacy compliance report. And of course, staying to respond to all our questions. We do not take that for granted. Thank you so much, participants, for always making that time. Please note that our webinars are always every last Thursday of the month. Do not miss out on them. Most of them are very educative and you will need this information. Please note that the recording is already available on our YouTube channel at PDPO Uganda because we have been live. And of course, the template, for those that don't really have the template or haven't been able to download it from the chat, kindly reach out to us, send an email to compliance@pdpo.go.ug or info@pdpo.go.ug, and you'll be able to get the template. We also encourage you to follow us on our social media platforms, because whatever information we share, it is always on our social media. Thank you very much for always making that time. Have a wonderful day.